Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Get Your Popcorn podcast. Happy Thursday. So, I initially was going to be doing a different film this week. I was going to be doing The Wizard of Oz. But in light of recent political happenings, I thought Inglourious Basterds might be a little more relevant. It's been a few days since the inauguration of Donald Trump, and I think I've been sitting with it quite a bit, particularly the rhetoric of Elon Musk's sending his heart out to people, which we all know that wasn't what that was. We're not going to pretend here that everyone in the world doesn't understand what that symbol means. It's banned to do in Germany. In no way believe that Elon Musk doesn't understand the meaning of that symbol. I'm also not going to pretend that a white man born in South Africa during apartheid might not have some internalized racism to unpack. And also his comments on Twitter making jokes about it afterwards, several days later. Yeah, that's been sitting with me along with the right wing, both here in Canada and in the States, just being like, oh, he didn't mean it, and aren't coming down and condemning it. You don't have to play the full team. Like, you can still be a member of a political party and condemn the horrible, racist, genocidal implications of a gesture. Here in Canada, Pierre Poilievre, when questioned about Elon Musk, only mentioned that his son wants to go to space, so he should align with Elon. So I would like everyone who listens to note that Pierre Poilievre said that after seeing the Nazi salute done. So yeah, take with that what you will, and please, in our upcoming election, vote, 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 vote. Get out and vote, make your voice heard, and make sure you can be the voice of people who are going to be affected by this. Even if you are a person, like, everybody's going to be affected by the upcoming election in Canada, for sure. But this isn't just about your interests and everything. Like, we are an entire country's worth of people that need to be thought about. And the impacts of things that Pierre Poilievre has said affect everyone, even if you don't think they're going to. So please, when the time comes when they dissolve Parliament and call for re-election, please vote. I think the voting will be over by the time that the Liberal Party election is happening, by the time this episode is released. So I won't go into that too much. But Mark Carney has some really, really good things to say. So he's got my vote, and I'm hoping that that it goes that way for the Liberal election, because he's got some really good things to say, and he's very smart and very qualified and very much acknowledges that our interests of this country and the importance of people that are not just white, powerful businessmen. Take with that what you will. Anyway, so we're doing Inglourious Basterds this week because I thought it was very, I don't know, it like struck a chord for me, the topic of all this, because of what's going on in the world. And we're seeing all these protests. There's them in Germany, protesting the alt-right party, their rallies that were going on, which Elon Musk also went to and endorsed their far-right party, who they have no neo-Nazis as members of this party. And Elon Musk is talking about how Germany should no longer feel bad for the sin of their parents and grandparents and things like that. It's not about that, although it's like what happened is horrible. And what is written on the walls of the concentration camps, those who do not understand history are condemned to repeat it. It is important to remember things like the Holocaust so that we know the warning signs of when things are happening again. And I don't know about you, but where I come from right now, people who didn't fucking pay attention in social studies tend to post a lot about how it's not a big deal. And there aren't bells that are going ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. And a lot of the kids that I know that took advanced history are all panicked. Not a coincidence, I don't think. In Canada, we are not free of guilt here. What had happened with the Indigenous population here and the genocide is real. That's also a thing that Pierre Poilievre likes to downplay. He's really pro John A. Macdonald, which is, what? Okay. Anyway, so we still have some acknowledgement here to be doing in Canada. We have a lot more work to be done in terms of reconciliation. So it's very important that we elect political leaders that believe that and help bridge what we can with the indigenous population here, and really remember and honor the fact that this is stolen land. We cannot under any circumstance operate on any other guides. And I don't give a shit if it wasn't your family that stole the land. I mean, my family immigrated here from Ireland, and they were given property by the government in order to homestead and development. Whose land do you think they were given? Yes, my family was immigrating from Ireland where they were dirt poor peasants and were coming here in order to have a better life. We're not going to pretend that they didn't have some sort of struggle. They definitely did. But they were not given land, like, they were given stolen land. And that was the opportunity that my family was given. My family got a leg up because they were given someone else's stolen land to develop. Okay. So that's a slight political rant, just based on what's happening here, because I think I can't talk about genocide in another country without acknowledging the genocide that happened here, where I live. So we're just going to go over a little bit about the Holocaust before we start Inglourious Basterds, because I really do feel like it's important background, because this is a fantasy revenge film about a group of Jewish soldiers that have like a special interest group in order just to basically kill as many Nazis as they can. So the Holocaust was not just a genocide of the Jews. It is kind of the main group that was targeted. There's 6 million Jews that were murdered throughout the course. That's obviously estimated. Exact numbers are not known. Soviet people from the Soviet Union, 4.5 million people were executed. Then there's another 3.5 million for a Soviet prisoners of war. Sorry, I have exact statistics up here. We have 1.8 Polish people, over 300,000 Serbian people, about 300,000 disabled people, 500,000 Romani people. Freemasons, we have 80,000. Slovens, we have 25,000. Gay and LGBTQ people, we have 15,000. Spanish Republicans, 3,500. Jehovah's Witnesses, 1,700, which is a grand total of 17 million people executed by the Nazi Party under the Third Reich. For me, this has always been kind of a special interest because it makes me think a lot about how I happen to be in history in a time that worked out for me. My one side of my family is from Ireland, but the other side is from Ukraine, which was under the Soviet Union at that time. And obviously, in order to get to Russia to invade, they had to go through Ukraine. And so I would not have been safe from this. There's also documentation. The way it worked, I've read it in a couple of novels, is you had to submit proper documentation that all 4 of your grandparents did not meet the criteria in order to avoid being sent off to these camps. And so one of my grandparents obviously would. So I would have been going. And it's something I think about a lot. Yeah, it's just a kind of a heavy feeling. I also have a bit of a connection to this because my great grandmother was a freedom fighter, which, if you don't know, were kind of civilian spies for the Allies that would pass information about the Nazis to allies. And so my grandmother, when she was 14, or great grandmother, sorry, she was 14, she was in Denmark. And the Nazis actually occupied where she was living, and the Nazis occupied the house in which she worked. So at 14, she would overhear what the Nazis were saying, and she would pass that information on to the Brits at great risk to her own personal safety. I did a project on her in grade 8, I believe it was. And she told me that the punishment at the time for them, and she knew people that this happened to, was the Nazis would cut open your stomach and let rats gnaw at your insides until you died, which takes a long time. You can have a stomach wound and bleed for, like, you're not dying of blood loss right away. So you're feeling all of that horribleness. So I'm very proud of her to be a teenager, a young teenager, um, doing all this. And that's actually where she met my great grandfather, who also was doing this. And I feel very proud to be a part of a group of people that recognized what was happening when it was happening and stood up and did something. So, and they protected the Jews. Denmark protected their Jews. So I feel very proud of that part of my own lineage. So I thought that was just something to add for everybody's own interest. With a little bit of backstory, I think most people are pretty aware of the Holocaust and what happened. So this film is set right at the very end of World War II. It starts off earlier. There's a small scene with one of the captains that he's trying to find a family of Jews, and then it snaps forward a few years, and then we follow the surviving member of that family. This is one of my very favorite Quentin Tarantino films. It's the first in his 3 fantasy revenge. Number 1 being this, number 2 being Django Unchained, and number 3 being Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is on a much smaller scale. Obviously, the Sharon Tate murders and the LaBianca murders for Charles Manson are much, much more small of a scale than the slavery in America in Django, and then the Holocaust in Inglourious Basterds. This is the first film for me of Quentin Tarantino's that I really got into. This came out when I was like 14, and I was like starting to explore films a lot more, and I was like blown away by this film. I had never seen a film, Quentin has a very like particular direction style and particular writing style. His dialogue's very slick, it's very smooth, and he makes a lot of visual references to other films. If you ever watch interviews with Quentin Tarantino, he is not only a director, but like an absolute like lover of all cinema and consumes mass amounts, and then puts references into the films that he loves within his own films, and they're highly stylized. He's also like famous for just like over the top graphic violence, which I don't know, you can't really do a World War II movie to any extent, like any amount of accuracy, without including the fact that it was super violent, especially what the Nazis were doing. Although no one was free of guilt in violence. War is inherently so violent. But Quentin Tarantino has kind of almost a cartoony spin on it. I think to me it feels very much like a graphic novel, or like if superhero movies were like a little more adult almost in the way that the violence is captured. It's so kind of over the top that it pulls out a lot of that stuff, that like reaction. Like in a horror movie, it's just enough to really grab you, but the way Quentin does it, it does this sort of thing that kind of kicks it into cartoony, which I don't know, I kind of like, but I know that that's a big deterrent for people who don't like Tarantino. They often use that as a anchor point in their argument about why he's a bad director. I don't know. His films are, pretty critically acclaimed. I think some people they like to conflate like violence and like inciting violence in the population. And to some extent, I do believe that, but to the other extent, I think it's important to be able to develop your own critical thinking skills. And that's actually the ongoing issue in our society, is that we are unable to splice out what media shares in our own opinions. And that we're easily swayed without being able to kind of think through stuff on our own. So I don't know. I think if a Quentin Tarantino movie incites violence within you, that violence was inherently in you, and that Quentin Tarantino movie didn't really have anything to do with it. That's just me. So Tarantino had this film in development for a long time. He wrote the original script in the late 90s and kind of struggled with an ending and worked on it for a number of years, trying to figure it out. And then he finished it shortly after doing Death Proof, which, isn't really my favorite one of his, but it is what it is. Inglourious Basterds made $321 million worldwide. This is the first appearance we see of Christoph Waltz. He ended up winning a Best Supporting Actor for his role as Hans Landa in the film. Christoph Waltz was just sort of a TV actor in Germany, and Quentin Tarantino kind of plucked him into stardom. His couple of performances within the Quentin Tarantino films, and that's all I've seen him in, is this and Django, and the very opposing characters. He's excellent. I think when you make a character or an actor can make you like hate someone and root for their like horrible downfall, and you pull past the actor into the character, I think that is an exceptional performance. So Tarantino originally wanted Leonardo DiCaprio to play Hans Lada, but ultimately they decided it should go to someone who is actually German speaking. Originally, Adam Sandler was in the role to play Johnny Donowitz, which is one of the members of the Bastards. I think I'm pretty relieved that he had to do Funny People with Judd Apatow. I do not like Adam Sandler in anything. I don't understand the staying power of his career at all. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So this is another film that Tarantino made with the Weinstein brothers. And this is where I feel conflicted about Tarantino, was his close relationship with Harvey Weinstein. And he acknowledges that he knew to some extent what the Weinsteins were doing, because he had a couple of girlfriends throughout time that were honest with him about how they felt harassed. But he would tell them to like leave them alone. And then Harvey Weinstein would, because I think Tarantino had enough weight and power behind him. However, like if you are aware of that stuff is happening and you're not really doing anything, like that's where I feel kind of conflicted. He does acknowledge that in interviews, but I don't think he's really unpacked a lot of maybe the guilt that he should be feeling on that situation. But yeah, this was financed by the Weinstein Company and Universal Pictures. Filming began in 2008, and it was shot in Germany and then edited there as well. So for casting, we have Brad Pitt as Lieutenant Aldo Raine, nicknamed Aldo the Apache due to his trademark of scalping Germans, which was a war tactic of the Apache. He is from the mountains in Tennessee. Melanie Laurent, I'm assuming is how it's said. I have no ability to speak French. Plays Shoshana Dreyfus. She is a French Jewish woman, and it's her escape from being hidden that we see in the very beginning of the film. Shoshana, in my opinion, is the main character of this film and the heart of this film. You know, the bastards and stuff, as you follow them, are kind of like the fun, kind of almost side plot, at least I feel, that feels more like kind of it's got almost like an Ocean's 11 kind of vibe to what they're doing. It's like almost this heist, this high stakes, violent heist that they're on, where Shoshana's story of escape and persecution and navigating the occupation of her country and concealment of her true identity, that I think is the heart of this movie. And I think it's why this film is received so well. And I think if Shoshana's plotline wasn't included in this film, it isn't as a powerful or an effective movie. And Melanie Laurent, she's amazing in this film. She's so great. She does so much with her facial expressions that really pulls you in, and you really are following her, and she's doing so much with not saying anything a lot of the time that you feel her own anxiety as she's kind of interacting with these Nazis as a Jew who's, concealing her identity. I had a lot of respect for her performance, and her performance was the one that I feel was by far the best in the film, although they're all pretty good. But she really stands out to me as the main character and the best performance of this film. Without Shoshana, this film doesn't have any heart. Christoph Waltz plays Hans Landa. He is a Austrian SS officer. He's ruthless, and he's known as the Jew Hunter. So he's the main antagonist of this film. Both in Aldo Raine's storyline and Shoshana's. Because they are interwoven. Although the two main protagonists never interact, the Hans Landa interacts with both. And like I said before, Christoph Waltz's performance in this is very it's very powerful. It's very upsetting. He's very evil. You don't see any kind of glimmer of good in him. He's like a good old-fashioned villain that you love to hate. Like, he's terrible. Eli Roth plays Donnie Donowitz, the Bear Jew. He executes Germans with a baseball bat. This is the part that initially Tarantino wanted Adam Sandler to do. God, I'm glad that that wasn't the casting choice. Michael Fassbender plays Lieutenant Archie Hickox, and he's a British commander and a former film critic who is assisting the Bastards. Diane Kruger plays Bridget von Hammersmark. She's a German film star that's flipped for the Allies and is a spy. Daniel Brewer plays Frederick Zoller, a German army sniper whose story was made into a propaganda film that is then shown at the end of the film. He interacts mostly with Shoshana. Till Swigler plays Sergeant Hugo Stiglitz. He's a former German army soldier who murdered Gestapo and then was recruited by the Bastards. BJ Novak has a small part. It's kind of more pronounced at the end of the film. He's also a member of the Bastards, and he's called Smithson Udovich, or nicknamed Little Man. And then we've got a bunch of very small kind of character roles. I won't go through all of them because there's like 30. But those are kind of the main players in the film. So like I said before, the reception of this film was quite good. Critics have scored at 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was kind of given an A to A- score on CinemaScore. Reactions at the Cannes Film Festival were initially kind of mixed. It was given an 8-minute standing ovation at its first screening. There was some commentary about how Tarantino gets kind of lost in the plot of World War II. A lot of that it was kind of fun to watch, but wasn't really overly engaging and insightful. Although lots of critics very much loved and appreciated the film, Christoph Waltz got a lot of attention for being so good, his performance in this movie. Like I said, he received his first Academy Award for this film. I think it's unfortunate that there wasn't as much attention paid to Shoshana, because, like I said, she's the heart of the film. She is why this film isn't just like stylized violence. There was some criticism within the Jewish press saying that this had sort of a negative impact on the Jewish population because it made them look as evil as the Nazis. That isn't how I interpret it. I interpret it as like it is a fantasy revenge. Knowing what we know now with the information, what we wish could go back and do it, knowing what Hitler was with future information. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I kind of look at it. Like, it's this fantasy revenge where you need the entire context in order to go back and do that. But there was some criticism for that and its revisionist history. The film was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor, Best Original Screenplay, where Waltz was awarded the Best Supporting Actor. So we'll get into the plot now. Sorry, I just need a little sip of Diet Pepsi. I've had to switch to Diet Pepsi because Diet Coke endorsed Trump and put him on their labels. So I've switched to Diet Pepsi because fuck Coke for doing that. Okay, so the film opens up in 1941, France. There's a farmer and he's splitting wood, and in the distance you can hear soldiers coming. And so he goes into the house and tells his daughters to get into the house. This guy's a dairy farmer. And the character of Hans Landa comes in. And so they begin speaking French to each other, obviously, because at this point it's a Nazi-occupied France. That's his native language. And he is interrogating him about family, the Dreyfuses, that are from the area, that are Jews that were not captured. And he is asking questions to him about where they are and if he knows any information. He reveals himself that his nickname is the Jew Hunter, and he threatens the farmer, Mr. Lapetit, that if he is hiding the Jews, that there will be punishment for his daughters. So as they're having this conversation, the camera kind of pans down, and we can see sort of these side profiles of the family, and they're hiding under the floorboards right below where the SS officer and Mr. Lapetit are having their conversation in the dining room. And there's this great shot of it's Shoshana's eyes, the oldest girl, and it goes right from her eye, and it goes up through the floorboard, and then zooms up. So you can see her below the feet of the SS. And so they switch to English at one point, and he interrogates him in English because he knows that the Jews below the floorboards most likely only speak French. I don't know how he knows that, but it is what it is. And Mr. Lapetit, for fear of his own daughter's safety, he gives them up and admits that they're under his floorboards and he's been hiding them. So Hans Lada pulls in the other SS officers and they shoot the floor out with machine guns. And then as this is all happening, Shoshana is somehow able to struggle free, and she runs across the field she's running towards the forest to try and escape. Then Hans Lada comes out and he points his gun at her, but she's far enough away by the time he kind of gets out there, and he screams, "Au revoir, Shoshana." And she's covered in the blood of her family, and she's running into the woods, fleeing for her life. And this is like, the first time I tried to watch this is where my husband had to stop. He's like, "I can't watch this. Like, I can't." He's like, this is too horrible. I can't look at this. It's too sad. So these are not easy scenes to watch. This is not, like, some of the bastard scenes are kind of like fun stylized violence, but like anything with Shoshana is like your heart is just like gripped, yeah, in like a mixture of like sadness and fear for this woman. And we have a scene with Brad Pitt as Lieutenant Aldo Rain, and he's recruiting Jewish American soldiers for a special mission. And it's a Black Ops mission that is solely, the purpose is to scalp Nazis and instill fear into them. And that's kind of the very famous line where he's like, "We're going to be doing one thing and one thing only, killing Nazis." So he explains to them that each of their mission is to scalp 100 Nazi soldiers. We then flip to a scene overseas and into Europe where the bastards, they're interrogating some German soldiers. It looks like there's a captain and two others, and Brad Pitt is interrogating them with the help of some translators, and he's introducing the bastards to this officer, and it shows like little clips of their history. There's a little scene where they talk about Hugo Stiglitz because he was a German officer. So this is when we start to see some of that really classic Tarantino stylized violence of him like assassinating the people. So following this interrogation, Lieutenant Aldo Rain has said, if you give up the next group of Nazi officers that are just down the way and tell us what sort of ammunition and artillery they have, we'll let you go. And the head officer refuses to give them up, and he just kind of yells, "Fuck you." And so they call in the Bear Jew, which is Donnie Donowitz, who's going to beat this guy to death with a baseball bat. And he does. It's pretty graphic, and there's a lot of like, obviously if you're beating somebody to death with a baseball bat, there's a lot of like anger behind it. And this is where I think some of the fantasy revenge feelings come in, where it's almost taking the anger of like what has happened and projecting it into the past with things like this. There's then two lower officers that are there to be interrogated. They shoot one guy right away, and then through translator they talk to the other soldier, and he gives them up, and he gives the next group of Nazi officers up like right away. They ask him where he is, he points it out, and he tells them. And then there's this they ask him this question, which is this ongoing theme of the film, which is, when you get home, what is the first thing you're going to do? And he says, hug his mother. And they're like, well, are you going to take that uniform off when you get home? And he says, yes, I'll burn it. And then they kind of ask him like, how there's going to be then no evidence of your crimes, that this is the side that you chose to stick with. And so Brad Pitt's character carves a swastika into this guy's forehead, and he says, "I'm going to give you something you can't take off." And he's sort of standing over, and this is like one of the very famous shots where like the point of view of the camera is that the guy that's just had the swastika carved into him. So the point of view is from his eyes, and he's looking up at Brad Pitt, and Donnie Donowitz is standing next to him, and he says, "So you're really getting good at that." And Brad Pitt says, "How do you get to Carnegie Hall?" "Practice." Which is a very famous saying in the States. It's this big concert hall in New York, I believe. Anyway, so we then switch to a scene right away with that guy, that same soldier who's had the swastika carved into him, with Hitler. And Hitler's starting to notice that there's all these soldiers and they're reporting what the bastards are doing, and they all have the swastikas carved into their forehead. And this guy says that he was let go to kind of give a warning to the Nazis about what's happening and what is going to happen to the other members that are caught by the bastards. We then jump into Paris, when this is where we find Shoshana, and she's operating under the name, it's really hard for me to say, I don't think I can say her last name, but Emmanuel, I believe, is the first name. It's really hard because it's a lot of this is entirely spoken in either French or German with subtitles. There isn't as much English unless it's the bastards talking, so it was hard for me to pick up a lot of it. So Shoshana is operating a cinema there, and she's taking down the signs for her old movie, sort of after the cinemas closed. And a SS officer, and this is Frederick Zoller, who is kind of this famous German soldier that has killed all these people, and they've made a movie about him. He walks by and he's talking to her, and he sort of takes a liking to her. He's flirting with her quite heavily. And she's not really having any of it, but this doesn't really like lose his intrigue in her. And I think I had forgot to mention before, but Shoshana doesn't, and I'm putting this in quotations, look like a Jew. I think she doesn't have the like very stereotypical like Eastern European Jewish Ashkenazi look that I think we're all quite familiar with, along with the mixing of the like propaganda that still permeates our culture today from what the Germans were taught about what a Jewish person looks like. Shoshana is blonde haired, she's blue eyed, like she looks very Aryan, for lack of a better term. So I think this benefits her character immensely because she is able to blend in. She doesn't have to like alter her kind of appearance in any way to avoid suspicion. She looks like just sort of a French citizen, which she is, but just she isn't under that like special like red flags that the German Nazis sort of placed in people's heads. And because Zoller is like really infatuated with her, he convinces Joseph Goebbels, who is a real person, to hold the film's premiere there. This propaganda film that they've made, could kind of like to try and impress her essentially, although it doesn't. We then flip to this scene where she's sitting in a cafe having coffee, and Zoller approaches her and he kind of tells her what's going on, and then she needs to speak with the officers. And the officer that she needs to be interrogated with is Hans Landa. And as you remember, this is the guy that shot her whole family, and she ran away covered in blood. So he's talking to her about different things during, he's eating this like eclair thing at this cafe. And the scene is so powerful where you almost sort of tune out what he's saying and you just like see her face and her response to everything. And this like, there's this like gripping fear, almost like a thriller fear of you're just kind of waiting for him to see her and figure it out. Because you know that this guy is highly, highly intelligent, and he was looking for her and he saw her run away. And so there's this like gripping sense of fear you feel. You're on the edge of your seat. Like, is this guy going to understand that 1 + 1 = 2? And thank God he doesn't. So Shoshana is engaged in a partnership with an African Frenchman. Well, Afro-French is what they've listed it as here. I'm not sure if that's the correct term, but a black man in France, which again is their Nazis aren't loving that. So they sort of have this like secret relationship with this guy that works with her at the theater. And they kind of craft this plot that when the entire powerful members of the Third Reich are in the cinema, they're going to lock them in and burn it to the ground with her nitrate films. We then flip back to the Bastards storyline, and there is a British commander named Lieutenant Archie Hilcox, who's a former film critic and speaks German. He's recruited by the Bastards in their Operation Kino, is what it's called, and they disguise him as a German officer, and they also put Stiglitz down there and Wiki to meet Bridget Van Hammersmark, which is the German film star that has flipped and has become a spy for the Allies in order to speak with her. And there's another group of Nazi officers that is down there, and they're celebrating the birth of one of their guys' sons. So they're celebrating, and then these people are trying to have kind of like this secret meeting where they're all undercover but trying not to arouse any sort of suspicion. There's a sergeant and a major down there as well that are real SS officers that have joined the table with these undercover spies. So there's this great scene where they're trying to kind of communicate, and the real SS are kind of picking up that the British guy who can speak fluent German might not be German. There is nuances to accents within the language that he isn't able to pick out. It's similar to when, you know, somebody speaks English, but that isn't their first language, and they have kind of different tones and the way that they phrase things, where you can easily pick out if you speak English that English isn't the language that they speak normally. And it's the same with German. I obviously can't hear a difference when I'm watching the film because I don't speak German, so I don't understand any nuance within the language. But at one point, the British soldier blows his cover because he's asking for 3 drinks, and you can't see my fingers, but he holds up the number 3 with his 3 middle fingers. The German 3 is actually just the thumb, the pointer, and the middle finger, and that's how you signal for 3 in Germany, and that's when he reveals himself to be an agent. A gunfight then sort of begins after this little standoff, and everyone is shot and is killed, other than this one. It appears to be this one SS officer that has just had the baby, and they're there celebrating. And he's down in this sort of underground bar, and you can hear Lieutenant Aldo Rain kind of calling down to him and asking if there's any survivors. And then Bridget von Hammersmark kind of cries out, "I'm alive, I'm alive." She's been shot in the foot, but she's alive. And so they want to do an exchange for Bridget. And basically, Lieutenant Aldo Rain says, "You got to trust me. Let me get Bridget, and I'll let you go free." And as they're sort of negotiating and Brad Pitt's character is coming down, Bridget von Hammersmark shoots the SS officer. We then flip to a scene where they're trying to get the bullet, I guess, out of Bridget von Hammersmark's foot. I can't remember, but she's got a big bullet wound. And Brad Pitt believes that she set up his men to be killed. And she's trying to explain that no, she is working for the Allies. And so Brad Pitt is torturing her, and he's sort of pushing his finger into her bullet wound, which is quite graphic and gross. She is sort of able to gain their loyalty and their belief by revealing that there's this premiere for a movie, and that wants to have this kind of subplot separate from Shoshana's, because they don't know this is happening, to kill the upper members of the Third Reich. And so they hatch this sort of plot in order to do that, and they decide that they're going to have some of the bastards pose as Italian filmmakers in order to sneak them into the premiere, essentially. Because the German language and the Italian language are very, very different. They don't believe that the German speakers are going to be able to pick up that the Americans can't really speak Italian. Lieutenant Aldo Rain says that he can speak a bit of Italian. It's horrendously done. It's like exactly what you think like an American like reading out of a books of Italian pronunciations would be. Like, it's terrible with this like thick Southern accent. And then after this, we flip back to the scene where Hans Landa is investigating the crime scene where all these SS officers had died, and they had that sort of standoff where the bastards are there too. And he finds Bridget's shoe there, and also an autograph that she had signed for one of the soldiers. And he now knows that Bridget is a double agent. The bastards then do infiltrate the premiere, and they've got bombs strapped to them. So it's very clear it's now going to be a suicide mission for 2 of the guys that they're sneaking in. They've got bombs strapped to their legs. Bridget von Hammersmark is all done up very nicely, but she of course has this big cast on her foot, and she's kind of lying to everyone and says that she hurt it in a mountain climbing accident. There's then this great scene where Hans Landa comes up to speak with her and speak to the guys, and it's revealed that he speaks Italian. And this is where like it clicks. He realizes who all those guys are, and he realizes that he's already knows that Bridget von Hammersmark is flipped as a double agent, and he's sort of laughing at the story, and you get the feeling that the bastards are kind of figuring out that he knows. He knows what's going on. And Bridget for sure thinks that he knows what's going on. He then kind of pulls her, Hans Landa then pulls her to the side and is trying to talk to her. And he lets her know that he knows what she's done right before strangling her to death. Hans Landa then has Lieutenant Alderaan and Utovich, or the little man, arrested, but he leaves the other two guys who have the bomb strapped to their legs in the theater. And this is like, I think, the highlight of Christoph Waltz's performance, is this like back and forth interrogation scene between Brad Pitt's character and him trying to negotiate. Hans Landa realizes the amount of power he has to wield here, because he can allow those bombs to go off next to Hitler, Goring, and Goebbels, and basically kill the upper levels of the Third Reich in exchange for his own freedom and kind of anonymity for his war crimes. So he insists that he speak to the head of Operation Kino in order to negotiate this. And there's kind of this great little moment where he's trying to Hans Landa is trying to make a deal with Brad Pitt. And Brad Pitt says, well, there's kind of a saying where something feels too good to be true, it isn't. And then Hans Landa ends up negotiating this great deal for himself, where he's going to have anonymity, and they're going to say that he was always a double agent, and he's negotiated this property for himself and U.S. citizenship and all these things in exchange for his now compliance with the death of the officers and Hitler in the Third Reich when those bombs go off in the movie theater. And so during this screen that's happening, so this is all like switching back and forth simultaneously. We then jump to Shoshana, and her partner have this elaborately crafted scheme where they've got all of her nitrate films behind the screen ready to go. And they are both on a suicide mission as well. They know that the second that spark is lit and the nitrate goes up, that they're going to die. It'll go off kind of like a big bomb and then flood through the theater. So what they've done is they've spliced in an image of Shoshana, or in these films, of her saying that she is a message for Germany and that to burn it down and that they're all going to die. And they've spliced it into this kind of climax scene of the movie. So it just adds this like element of like, you're just like waiting for this peak. And so she's in the projector room and her partner is standing behind the screen, behind all the nitrate films, and he's smoking a cigarette. And it's just like, it's happening, like, what's going to happen. And it's just like, kind of this like very strong scene, because they love each other, and they're doing this sort of like in companionship, and like they're going to go out with like love and like they're doing this for the Jewish people and the revenge of what's happened. It's very like, I do feel Shoshana is very much the heart of this film entirely. And as she's in the projection room, she's getting ready to swap over, and the film's going to go up soon. Zoller then comes to see her, and he kind of makes advances at her, and she kind of rejects him and says he has to go. And he's been kind of this not lovable, like that's, I've never described a Nazi that way, but it's sort of this like guy who's just like very kind of seems like interested in her and is like really intrigued by her, but not necessarily threatening. And she denies his advances, and he like bangs open the door and screams at her. And she is like he kind of hurts her, and she's very like affronted. And then all of a sudden she like switches and tells him to lock the door, and it sort of appears that like she's gonna like some like love is gonna go down. And then she shoots him a few times, and he falls, and he's kind of groaning. And this is where you see that Shoshana is not she's not operating on the same level as the Nazis. Like, she hears him groaning and dying, and she is like overcome kind of with this like not necessarily regret, but this impact of like what she has done. It isn't nothing for her to take a life. It's not as mindless as like you see with some of the bastards and then the Nazis, obviously. Like, there is much more complexity to her emotions on how she feels about killing this man. And this is her fatal error, her kindness. She goes up to his body to kind of roll him over, and he is a gun, and he shoots her, and Shoshana dies. And we very much have an overhead shot, almost like Psycho, where it doesn't quite start at the eye, but it zooms up, and you see both of them shot dead on the floor. And then film switches in the screening room, and you see Shoshana's face, and then it plays the clip of telling them that they're all going to die. and the boyfriend then flicks his cigarette into the nitrate film, and the theater begins to go up in flames. And as the theater's going up in flames, the two bastards move up into the balcony and they are like firing shots from their machine guns. They're killing Hitler. They shoot off his face. They're firing as many shots as they can into the crowd. The theater is burning down, and then when enough heat gets to them and the fire gets to them, the bomb goes off that are strapped to their legs and everybody dies. Then we swap back to Hans Landa and Aldo Rain and Udovich. And so the deal is that they're going to drive out of the borders of Paris and then swap over, and then Lieutenant Aldo Rain and Udovich are going to arrest them and then bring them to the Allies. And then that's when the deal will be worked out. So as they're swapping over, Lieutenant Aldo Rain and Udovich handcuff the two guys. They shoot one of the officers. And this is where Hans Landa realizes that his deal is too good to be true. And so they kill that guy, and Hans Landa is like yelling at him and saying, they're gonna kill you for this. And then Brad Pitt is like, nah, I'm gonna get chewed out. I've been chewed out before. It's okay. And then we kind of cut to the other theme of the film where they ask him, you've gotten this really good deal. What are you gonna do when you get home? Are you gonna take off your Nazi uniform? And they say, if it was up to me, you'd be wearing this your whole life. And so this is where they decide to carve the swastika into Hans Landa's forehead. So when he gets this great deal, he can never, ever escape the fact that he's a Nazi. And that's where the film ends. So I feel like reading through the plot a lot, and this is a lot of the films that I do, it doesn't always capture the impact, because Tarantino's direction style and his dialogue is like so unique and pithy that you kind of just have to see it in order to really appreciate it. I can go through the plot. Also, I feel like there's parts of these films that I necessarily am not always the best to speak on. I think with a love of movies, you always come from a different angle. Like some people are really into the direction, some people are very into scripts, some people are very into acting. And because my background and my knowledge is more based on acting, that is what I look for within films the most. And so I, particularly with Melanie's performance as Shoshana, is what really draws me to this movie, as well as Brad Pitt's character, where he's not necessarily the most complex character in the world, but he portrays it in kind of this almost humorous comic relief to this horribly dark plot. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed this film quite a bit. And Christoph Waltz, this is sort of when he came into mainstream success. Over here, he was a mainstream actor over in Europe. But yeah, this is a great film. I highly recommend it. I kind of give it 4 out of 5 stars just because you don't have that same level of depth as a lot of them. But that's kind of where I rate a lot of Tarantino films. Is just shy of full round characters. Sometimes there's usually 1 or 2 with the full roundness, but not everybody. Yeah, so thank you all for tuning into this show. Remember to like and subscribe, follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to this. There's also on YouTube. You can follow me at the Get Your Popcorn Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. I also am up on Letterboxd if you want to follow along. And if you could rate and leave a comment, that is really, really helpful. Share if you can. Yeah, so thank you so much, and I hope you have a really happy Thursday.